Solving Inequalities, which is 7.6. Solving inequalities is just like solving equations. In these next three examples, we're going to talk about what an inequality is. You must be at least 18 years old to vote in the United States. This can be represented by the inequality y, could be years, it's got to be greater than 18. You must be at least 42 inches to ride the bumper cars. This must be represented by h, which is your height, has got to be greater than or equal to 42. Children under 12 will be admitted with no charge. This can be represented by A, could be admission, your age could be less than 12 years old. You see this sometimes in museums or different places offer free charge, but you've got to be less than 12. So each of these are examples of inequality. In our next section, it's got examples of inequality symbols. You have greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and then not equal to. These are 5 examples of inequality symbols that we're going to be using in this lesson. Vocabulary. These are the terms that you're going to be seeing in this lesson. An inequality. An inequality is a mathematical sentence. It's formed by placing an inequality symbol between two expressions. It's different from an equation because that's a mathematical sentence with an equal sign in it. Solution of an inequality. The solution of an inequality is the set of numbers that you can substitute for the variable to make the inequality true. In our last terms that you'll be using is graph an inequality. The graph of an inequality in one variable is the set of points on a number line that represents the solution of the inequality. So in these inequalities that you're going to have, you're going to be asked to graph them, and you will graph them on a number line. So in our first example, A, x is less than 4. That means all numbers less than 4 will be the answer. Any number that you put in there, but it's got to be less than 4 to make the inequality correct. So if you'll notice, if you're going to have to graph it, you'll draw a number line, put the number 4 there, and it is, in this example, it is an open circle. An open circle means it does not include the 4, because our answer is x is less than 4, that is all numbers less than 4, but not including it. Notice the star I have here. If the inequality is less than or equal to, it's an open circle. It means it does not include the number. If the inequality is closed, that means it's going to be greater than or less than. It's a closed one. It includes that number. Let's do some examples showing that. In this next example on B, we have x is less than or equal to -2. That means all numbers less than or equal to 2. So notice on the -2, I have a closed circle there. That means it includes -2 and all numbers less than that. In C, x is greater than 3. Notice it is not including the 3, so it's an open circle and then showing all the numbers greater than 3. In our last example on this page, D, x is greater than or equal to -1. Notice I have a closed circle. It's all numbers greater than or equal to -1. So on -1, it's a closed circle. And the arrow is being demonstrated by going to the right because it's all numbers greater than or equal to -1. Okay, so we're going to write the inequality represented by the graph. I'm going to pause this and come back and check. You can check your answer. Now, listen carefully. Equivalent inequalities are inequalities that have the same solution. You can produce an equivalent inequality in the following ways. Add or subtract the same number on each side. Multiply or divide by the same positive number. These two steps that I just read are similar to solving two-step equations. So solving an inequality are similar to solving an equation, except for multiplying or dividing by the same positive number. When you come to an equation where you're having to multiply or divide with the coefficient, if it's a positive number that you're dividing by, you do the same thing as you would an equation. So in your notes, circle that word positive. We're going to address the issue of what do you do when you're multiplying or dividing by a negative number. So let's move on. Some equalities must be solved for before the solution can be found. So in our example 3, we're going to solve the inequality. So just as we would in solving equations, we're going to add 1 to each side, where D is going to be less than or equal to 2. Then you're going to draw your number line, plot a 2, and in this case I'm just going to find the 2 on the number line given. I'm going to have a closed circle because D is going to be less than or equal to 2, and then I'm going to graph the inequality. So in this step, we solve the inequality and then we graph it. Okay, in A, B, and C, we're going to solve the inequality and graph it. Again, display your answer so that the variable will be on the left-hand side of the inequality to help you graph it. Now, in solving inequalities, we added or subtracted each side to the inequality. Notice on B, initially we had 7 as less than B, but in order to help us graph it, we changed the inequality so that the variable is first. So you have B is greater than 7, and that helps you to be sure you're graphing it correctly on these examples. Be sure that you check to make sure if it's going to be an open circle or a closed circle. Solving inequalities is very similar to solving equations. You can add or subtract the same number from each side. So in this example, we're going to add 3 to this side, add 3 to this side. So C is going to be greater than or equal to 2. So we're going to find the 2, close circle, graph it, the inequality. Notice on B, you can multiply or divide each side by a positive number. Notice it's in bold, notice it's underlined, positive number. So in this example, we're going to divide each side by 6 using the inverse operation. Y is going to be less than -7. I'm going to find -7, open circle, and graph it. And so, here we go. Look at what Miss Springer's got up here in red. Watch out. Don't forget to reverse the inequality when you multiply or divide each side of an inequality by a negative number. Now, recall on the previous slides, I had you circle the word positive when multiplying or dividing 2 times. So we have the same rules for solving an inequality as with equations, except for when you multiply or divide by a negative number. In order for the inequality to be true, you have to reverse the sign. So only when you multiply or divide by a negative number in an inequality do you reverse the sign. Let's do some examples. In example 5, we have negative 3x is greater than or equal to negative 15. We're going to have to divide each side by negative 3. X, now, since I'm dividing by negative 3, we're going to reverse the negative sign. If you did not reverse the negative sign, then the inequality would not be true. So now let's graph. X is less than or equal to negative 5. I'm going to find negative 5. It's going to be a closed circle because it has an equal sign. And I'm going to graph it going to the left. In example 6, I have x divided by 2 is less than or equal to negative 1. Inverse operation is going to be multiplication. So I'm going to divide this side by a positive 2, this side by a positive 2. X is less than or equal to negative 2. I did not reverse the inequality because I did not multiply by a negative number. So now I'm going to find negative 2. It is included in it, so I'm going to do a closed circle, and I'm going to graph it. Inequality. So let's do some more examples of these, always checking to see if we're multiplying or dividing by a negative number. So I'm going to pause the video and we'll come back and check our work. Okay, notice that in each of these examples, we did the inverse operation to solve for the inequality. We reversed the inequality sign in number 9 because we divided each side by a negative number. Now, for which inequality do you invert the sign? In this inequality, you're going, in number 1, you're going to divide this side by negative 4, this side by negative 4. X will be less than negative 6. This side, you're just dividing by a positive 4. So your answer will still be a greater than negative 6.